First, most importantly, is you don't want your pasta to stick together when you make it. And the only way to achieve that is by making pasta in a really big pot. And I'm talking like, you know, a pot that's about this big around and stands about that tall. In fact, the bigger pot you use, the better off you'll be. The reason for this is if you try to make your pasta in a small pot of water, the noodles don't have room to move around. They they bump up against each other, their starchiness gets like sticky and then they stick together. It's a real problem when you try to cook pasta in a small pot. That's why you want to use as big a pot as possible. I would even go so far as to say, if you're making pasta for 2 people, you want to use a 4-quart pot. That seems like a lot of water and it seems like a big pot, but when your pasta comes out perfectly and not stuck together, you'll realize that it's totally worth it. Another key to keeping your pasta from sticking is to stir it constantly for the first 30 seconds. That first 30 seconds when the pasta starts to absorb the water is where it's at its most vulnerable for sticking. So when you first add the pasta to the water, you want to keep stirring, stirring, stirring until it's had a few seconds to cook, 30 to 60 seconds, and then you can stop, let it do its thing, and only stir it every few minutes. You need to make sure that you stir your pasta relatively consistently though. You cannot walk away and like just let it be, because what happens is all those noodles kind of like bump up against each other again, and some of them settle to the bottom or they settle to the top because they're lightweight and they float to the top. And anything that's touching for a long time will stick. So stirring your pasta every few minutes is the perfect tip to keep it from sticking, because nobody wants like a clump of stuck together noodles. Just as important as how big the pot is what you put into it. We're talking water. Of course, you need water to cook noodles, right? No surprise there. But this is so important when it comes to cooking pasta. This is salt. You need to use a surprisingly generous amount of salt in pasta water. Like if you were to ask an old Italian grandma how much salt to add to your pasta water, she would say, it needs to taste like the sea. And I have a horrible Italian accent, so I'm not even gonna fake it. But like, it's a surprising amount of salt, right? So if you have a 4-quart pot that is almost full of water, you would probably want to add like 3 or 4 tablespoons of salt. Like, and it's almost enough salt that it makes the water unpalatable. Not like awful, like you don't want to taste it and be like, gag, ugh. Like you want, you know, to be able to tolerate the amount of salt in there. But it's like, if you've ever been to the beach and you've gotten like salt water in your mouth from the ocean, that's what it should taste like. And the whole point of doing this is that it seasons those noodles from within, right? So if you take noodles and you put them in just plain old water, like no amount of salt after the fact will make them taste like they've been salted. Like that starch is really bland. It's a really resilient blandness. The only way to properly season noodles is to salt the water generously ahead of time so that salty water soaks into every last fraction of an inch of pasta. Now, when it comes to how much salt to use, I do want to caveat this. You can use too much salt in your pot. I've done it before, actually. Like I inadvertently wasn't paying attention and I dumped more salt in the pot. And I was in such a hurry that I didn't even notice it. So then I cooked my pasta in there, and when I pulled the noodle out to test it, I was like, oh my God, this is like psychotically salty. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to save over-salted pasta. The only thing you can do is pitch it. I mean, you can try adding an unsalted sauce, but that like over-salted pasta is really gonna like take front seat. And if you over-salt your pasta, your best bet is to just toss it and start over. Now there's, I guess it's sort of an old wives' tale. It's a non-truism, and that is adding oil to your water. So I've gotten into so many arguments about this, like with people, my grandma does this, my mom does that, my Italian dad always they're all wrong. Sorry. Hate to be the one to break it to you. The reality is when you add oil to your pasta water, like it just creates a greasy mess, right? And there's a problem for a couple reasons, right? So first of all, the pasta, if the surface of your water is here, the pasta is down here. Doop, doop, doop. And we all know that oil and water don't mix. So where's your oil? It's right here. Do these look like they're interacting very much at all? Nope, not from a physics standpoint. Like it's not gonna happen. What generally happens is that pasta or that oil just like sits on the top, kind of making a mess, not doing anything, until you strain out your pasta. You strain out your pasta, and that oil coats all of your noodles. And this is where it becomes an issue, right? So you get oil on your noodles, right? Because you added oil to your pasta cooking water, and then you add your beautiful sauce to your noodles. Well, it's not gonna stick. The sauce is not gonna stick to the noodles. There's like grease on your noodles. Like nothing sticks. Like if you ever tried to pick up like a greasy bottle, it just like slides out of your hands, right? Your noodles are the same way. If you have greasy noodles, sauce isn't gonna stick to them. It's gonna slide right down to the bottom of the bowl. There's one opportunity to oil your pasta, and I don't like to do it, but sometimes you have to, right? So if you're making a cold pasta salad and you take your pasta out of the strainer and it's just sitting there for a little while, those noodles are gonna stick together really badly. One way to keep them from sticking together is to just toss the strainer occasionally, right? Just like toss it, and the noodles will kind of jump around and it keeps them from sticking. If you know that your pasta is gonna be used for a cold pasta salad, you can add just a little itty bit tiny whisper of oil. We're talking like, maybe half a teaspoon for like 2 servings of pasta. And then you just toss it all together so that there's like barely a coating of oil on those noodles, right? Just barely a coating of oil. And that will keep them from sticking together. So if you know that your pasta is just gonna be sitting there off to the side for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you know you're not gonna have the opportunity to shake it, or you're probably going to forget, add just a tiny bit of oil, but still, even if you know you're gonna do that, do not oil your pasta water, because that will add way too much oil to your pasta and it'll just make a big mess. Another tip to cooking pasta, long pastas in particular, if you have pasta like this, spaghetti or fettuccine or angel hair, anything that's long like that, people have this tendency to break the pasta in half before they put it in the pot of boiling water. And I hate that. Please don't do that. It's like sacrilege. So pasta is long because that's how pleasant a noodle is to eat, right? Like eating a short noodle is kind of annoying. It doesn't really wrap well around a fork. Like it kind of flips around. It kind of splatters sauce on you. It's really obnoxious, right? A long noodle is long for a reason and it should be enjoyed that way. Now, I know you're gonna say, but they don't fit in the pot. The ends stick out, and that's true. But the reality is they only stick out for like 15, 20 seconds. So if you take your pot of water and you stick your noodles in and the ends are sticking out, like just wait a couple seconds. If you slowly just push the ends in, you'll notice within like 10 seconds, those noodles start to bend pretty quickly. Within like 10, 15, 20 seconds, depending on the noodle, like they'll actually just bend into the water all on their own. And then give them a good stir for the first 30 to 60 seconds to make sure they don't stick, and you're well on your way.